Welcome. I'm Emily Cabbage. I'm the Director of Marketing at NAFA, the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. Our webinar today is part of Help Protect Our Families campaign, which strives for financial security for all Americans. Today, we are pleased to have the college funding coach, Brock Jolly, with us today. In early 2000, when Brock launched his financial planning career, he was optimistic about the future. He had landed his dream job and financial markets were doing phenomenally well. A few months later, the dot-com bubble burst, causing many Brock's prospective clients to lose a significant amount of their wealth, and although he didn't know it at the time, forever changing Brock's career path. Because of the market downturn, many parents sought Brock's financial advice regarding how to pay for their children's college education. After doing significant research, he determined that many of his peers didn't really understand how financial aid and the college funding process worked. He sought to educate parents around this agonizing and fear-inducing topic and discovered his niche. In 2002, Brock founded the College Funding Coach with one goal in mind: teaching parents how to pay for college for their kids without sacrificing their own retirement savings. The fact is, college is getting more and more expensive every year, and unless a family develops an informed strategy early, whether that is optimizing your eligibility for need-based aid or maximizing your liquidity and cash flow, it's difficult to win the college funding game. Brock is a founding partner of wealth management firm Veradis Financial, headquartered in Tysons Corner, Virginia. He's been recognized as a top performer within the financial planning community. He currently serves as treasurer for NAFA, the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. Brock, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. Really appreciate your help and the hospitality and all of that. So you must have gotten the long version of the bio, so I apologize to everybody for that. But excited to be here, and like Emily said, just share a little bit about what has become my niche in the financial services industry. And like she said, never really intended to be an expert in college funding. It really just developed over time, and it was something that I became really passionate about because I observed and continue to observe that so many families just really have challenges and stress around saving and paying for their children's college education. So excited to be here, excited to share some ideas with folks tonight, and let's dive in. That's me. So a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to be probably a little bit less than an hour. Obviously, we're doing Facebook Live. We've got some folks who are live on the webinar. We've got other folks who are going to be watching this after the fact. So we actually don't have the chat box enabled. But what I would ask you is after you've watched this, and you can, if you pull out your smartphone, pull out the camera, you can point the camera right at that QR code, and it'll take you to an evaluation that you can complete. We'd love your feedback. And more importantly, what I'm going to talk about at the end of today's presentation is you're going to get lots and lots and lots of totally free information once you fill out that evaluation. It just sort of opens the door. We've got a little, we call it our mini vault. And so on that mini vault, you can get lots of information. I'll talk about it at the end, but what I will tell you is it's worth the price of admission, which I guess the price of admission was free, so maybe that's not how I should phrase it. But the point is lots and lots of really valuable information that is also free. So lots of good stuff for you here. Compliments of NAFA. So I always start this conversation by really explaining the why are we here. And Emily talked about it a little bit, but just to underscore some of it, I started in the financial services industry in 2000. And as many of you may recall, the stock market was doing great. Anything that had a .com after it was just doing phenomenally well. And I got into the industry, and what happened? Well, those .coms weren't doing quite so well. And I'm always quick to explain to people that it was not entirely my fault. But parents kept asking me, Brock, how am I going to save and pay for my kids' college education? I had this much, and now I've got this much. Or maybe I just never did a good job of saving. And honestly, early on in my career, I didn't have an answer. But I started to research it. And as Emily was explaining at the intro, I figured out a couple of things. Number one, I figured out that most financial advisors don't really understand the ins and outs of how college funding truly works. And number two is that I figured out that for most families, where's their money? It's in the equity in their homes, and it's in their retirement plans, which is great for retirement. It's not so great when you need to send 1 or 2 or 3 or more children to college. You need liquidity, you need cash flow. And so, long story short, and again, Emily explained this, but in 2002, I started teaching a class on this topic, and it really took off like wildfire. And I realized that, we were sort of on to something because college is getting more and more expensive. Parents are concerned about those costs of colleges. As parents, we want our kids to go to great schools, but those great schools are expensive. And here's the question: how do you save and pay for your children's college education and still retire one day? And that's really our mission here, is helping families to solve this multifaceted approach of not just saving for college, not just retiring, but how do you do both? And all the other things that come before and after and in between. And that's what this is going to be about this afternoon, this evening, as we talk through this topic. I said this before, but most people, their money is really in two places: their house, their retirement plans. What we do, the why are we here, is we offer a game plan. So we're going to talk about a lot of ideas this evening. I always say it's sort of a 30,000 foot overview. A lot of ideas, a lot of concepts. One of my favorite books on this topic is a book called 1001 Ways to Pay for College. I promise you, we are not going to talk about all 1001 ways of paying for college. We're going to talk about a few of them. We're going to talk about some strategies, maybe some inside the box and some outside the box ways of paying for college. At the end of this presentation, you may say to yourself, I get it, but I'm not a do-it-yourselfer. I'm not the kind of person who says I'm going to gather all the information and go do it myself. Some of you are, and if you are, we want to be a resource for you. Happy to have conversations, happy to help. We've also found that a lot of people over the years are not do-it-yourselfers. They're the kind of person who says, you know what, I'm a good collaborator or I'm a good delegator. And I really want to go to somebody who understands this and has done it hundreds or thousands of times and can help hold my hand, or sometimes maybe kick me in the rear end to get me to do the things that I need to do to make this process easier. And that's what the College Funding Coach is all about. We've got advisors around the country who are part of our community and would gladly sit down with you, hold your hand, walk you through the process. So if that's something you want to avail yourself of, certainly happy to approach that. But right now, we're just going to give you lots of information, hopefully provide you with lots of value. If it's something you want to talk about a little bit further, we'll give you some resources for that at the end of the presentation. I saw a commercial a few years ago, and I said, you know what? This is exactly what it's like for so many of our families. So think about your situation for a second. Tell me if this is anything like what you might be experiencing.
I got into one of the best schools in the country! I got into one of the most expensive schools in the country!
When stress gives you heartburn with headache, Alka-Seltzer gives you relief fast. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz.
Right? We want our kids to go to great schools, but those great schools are expensive. I talk to college and career counselors at high schools, and I say, you know, your job, so to speak, is to help kids get into great schools. Mom and dad, you might say to your kids, take really tough classes, get great grades, get involved in activities, become the president or the captain of this and that, because it's going to look good on the college resume. You want to get into great schools. And as my friend Mark Salisbury at Tuition Fit has said to me before, it's sort of counterintuitive because a lot of times kids do everything that mom and dad and their counselors and their teachers told them to do. And then they get into those great schools, and then mom and dad are saying, well, we can't pay for that school. So how do you do good planning today? Whether you've got a second grader, a 10th grader, or a junior in college, how do you do good planning today so that in the future you've got a good game plan for saving and paying for college and still being able to retire one day? Quick poll, and normally we do this as a live poll in our workshops. Obviously we don't have everybody here live this evening, but I just want to ask you this. Why are you here? I talked about why we're here and sort of the mission and vision of the College Funding Coach. But my question for you is, why are you here? You know, is it where do I start? Understanding the financial aid process, learning a little bit more about scholarships or student loans, specific tools. Maybe you've heard about things like 529 plans or other college instruments for saving and paying for college. Maybe you saw the title and you said, I want to know the little known secrets of paying for college. Maybe you're one of those who says, give it all to me. Or maybe you said, you know, I just got an hour to kill. I'm going to go check out this webinar. Whatever it is, I think we're going to cover all of it. in this presentation, but we'd love to hear from you if there are things that aren't addressed in today's presentation that maybe we can cover with you on a one-to-one basis or add more value. First term with which to familiarize yourself is what's called cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is your cost all in. So what that means is tuition, room and board, books, computers, supplies, all the costs that you may have when it comes to paying for college. So for this school year, actually this is last year by the time we're recording this, but for the 2021 school year, the cost of a public in-state university, a little under $27,000. For an out-of-state public school, a little over $43,000. For a private school, about $55,000. And for the elite and Ivy League schools, $75,000 on up. Okay, that's a lot of money. Even if we're talking about an in-state public, it's a lot of money. Okay, and think about it. Is your kid going to graduate in 4 years or 5 or 6? Do you have more than one child to educate? It adds up. How do you save and pay for college and still retire one day? And then it gets worse. And I promise, I'm going to make it a little bit worse, but I also promise you that I'll make it better. College obviously is getting more expensive. And if we think back at it and we look at it, and this is a little bit of a nerdy deep dive on economics of college. So this is looking since January of 2000. January of 2000 through mid-2021. CPI, Consumer Price Index, which is a basic measure of inflation. How much more expensive are things today than they were in January of 2000? And things roughly, that basket of goods is roughly 56% more expensive. Then go to the far right and look at college tuition and fees. College tuition since January of 2000 has gone up by over 169%. What that basically means is that the cost of college has gone up triple the rate of inflation. So if you sat down in January of 2000, you said, hey, we've got these kids or we're thinking about having kids and we ought to start saving for college. And you did that. And you said, well, what's inflation? And you mapped out a reasonable number for inflation. Today, if your kids are going off to college, you might have about a third of the amount of money that you need because college is getting so much more expensive. And I could do a whole hour-long presentation and get on my soapbox and tell you about why, but it sort of doesn't matter why for purposes of today's conversation. There's a whole host of reasons, and it's an interesting conversation, but we'll save that for a different conversation for a different day. The key today is how do we solve it? How do we overcome that monumental inflation? Then we look and we say, okay, well, how have parents historically saved and paid for college? And every time I flash this slide or a similar slide up in my presentations, I get a parent who says, well, which one's the best, Brock? And I'll tell you, there isn't a best. So before I go through these, what I will tell you is there are pros and cons to every single financial instrument that's out there. As an example, at the top of the list, UGMAs, UTMAs. When I went to college, my parents saved for my education using a UGMA account, Uniform Gift to Minors, or a custodial account. They bought stock. My dad had gotten a couple of little bonuses from work and put it into some stocks that he thought was good. And that was what was used to eventually help pay for my college education. It did great. But here's the problem. And fast forward to today, because there are 3 real issues with UGMAs and UTMAs. Number one is that they are taxable accounts. Okay, so any growth that you have is taxed. Now, it is taxed in the name of the child, which more often than not is at a lower tax bracket than the parents or even the grandparents. But number 2 is that the money is in the child's name. So if that child could potentially qualify for need-based aid, it counts as a child's asset, which, as you'll learn a little bit later, assets in the child's name count at a rate of 20%. So all else being equal, if you're eligible for need-based aid, you'd rather not have money in the child's name. But number 3 is the big one. And number 3 is, who knows what happens with that money when the child turns 18? The short answer is that when the child turns 18, in some states it's 21, it's their money. If they want to take that money and they want to go jump on a Harley Davidson, cruise across the country, start a rock and roll band, live in a tree, whatever it is, that's their money. And mom and dad, you can't do anything about it. So for all of those reasons, I would tell you, we don't see a whole lot of new money going into UGMAs or UTMAs. They're still out there, but we just don't see a lot of new money going in there. You know, things like savings bonds. Think about interest rates right now. Incredibly low relative to where they used to be. Loans, grants, scholarships. I could do a whole presentation about this. I'll just tell you a couple of things. Number one, with regard to loans, it's a good legal term, caveat emptor, meaning buyer beware. There's a lot of loans out there. Understand the process. Understand that if it's really easy to qualify for a loan, it may not be the best loan for you. If you have to pay an upfront charge to just qualify for the loan, that's probably not a great deal, as long as you've got good credit. Scholarships, again, whole lengthy conversation. I'll also tell you loans and scholarships. We've got a ton of resources on our website. Website's just thecollegefundingcoach.org, where you can go and you can find information about these. But what I will tell you, my advice on scholarships, start early. Even if you've got a 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader, never too early to start thinking about college scholarships. We had a young man about a decade ago who won a national science fair. And as part of that, he qualified for a $25,000 scholarship for college. He was a 6th grader. Think about how much easier mom and dad's job becomes when it's their intention to pay for their son's education, and he's gone and won this science fair, and with it comes a $25,000 scholarship. I could go through all of these at length, but what I will tell you, pros and cons, right? Borrowing against retirement plans, really easy, but you're paying it back, and you're paying it back with after-tax dollars that then in retirement, when you pull money out, gets taxed again. So think about your money and what the impact of borrowing, paying taxes, putting it back in, then pulling the money out in retirement and paying taxes all over again. So lots of things, and there's the ripple effect of all of these. You know, things like the post 9/11 GI Bill or ROTC programs are attractive. Section 529 plans are sort of the new kid on the block. They've now been around for 25 years, believe it or not. And there's different varieties and state by state. We'll talk about these in a little bit. And we've also got lots of resources about 529s. We've got calculators, we've got comparison tools on our website to determine, should I do my in-states plan or should I do an out-of-state plan? How much should I put into the 529 plans? What's my tax deductibility in my state, if any? Different states have different rules, and it's important that you look at them. You don't have to use your own state. By the same token, I have people who say, well, I really love this mutual fund family, and I'm going to use that. Well, the problem is that if you don't use your home state's plan, that mutual fund family that you really love and adore has to earn what I call a hurdle rate. They've got to earn a higher rate of return by whatever the state tax advantage is. In some states, that can be a pretty significant hurdle. And so, again, lots of things here. I'm trying to unpack a few ideas, some things to think about, but I would just tell you advantages and disadvantages to every single one of these instruments. And it's really important that you sit down with your advisor, or if you want to sit down with someone from the College Funding Coach team, we're happy to review this with you and talk about those advantages and disadvantages that exist in all of these different tools. And the key is understand where you are today, where you're trying to go. What schools are your kids considering? Are they looking at community college? Are they looking at a 4-year institution? Public, private, in-state, out-of-state, etc. It all goes into creating a strategy behind this. And what I will tell you every day of the week, strategy is far more important than product, right? And what we're looking at here is products. Right? The strategy is much more critical than the products that you utilize. When we talk about 529 plans, understanding the state tax benefits and the different states have different rules. Some are tax parity states. Love those. They offer a tax deduction for contributing to any 529 plan, and you can see those there. Some states are what we call tax neutral. What that means is that in most cases there's not a tax advantage to using your home state's plan. You see some big states there like Florida and Texas and California where there's no significant advantage to using that state's plan. And then all other states offer some type of tax break, whether that's a tax deduction or a tax credit for using their state's 529 plan. So again, a lot to unpack there. I would tell you, go onto our website, look at under the section that says get help. You can look at one of these calculators. And we've got a calculator that'll allow you to compare your home state's 529 plan with other states and understand what may be the best solution for your situation. Oops. My question that I always ask is, we talked about the 529 plans, and a 529 plan is a wonderful instrument. But what I would ask you is, as we look back at this list, the question I always have is, what's the best way to pay for a college education? My answer to that is with what we call other people's money. Some of you may have read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And in that book, he talks about OPM, other people's money. And I think it's great when you apply it to college. And one of the easiest ways to get other people's money for college is by looking at college endowments. Every single college and university has an endowment. It's money that they use to build buildings, to endow professorships, and most importantly for your purposes, to attract and retain really talented students. And so you look at a little school at the top of our list here up near Boston called Harvard. Harvard has almost $40 billion in their endowment. Now think about that for a second. The cost of attendance at Harvard, in rough numbers, is about $75,000 per student per year. With $40 billion in their endowment, Harvard could cover the cost of attendance for every single student basically in perpetuity. Yet they charge $75,000 per year. My question for you is, why? And my answer for you is, because they can. Because Harvard knows that there are lots of students and families who will gladly spend $75,000 a year in order to get that crimson bumper sticker for the back of the Honda Odyssey. And look, if you'll spend $75,000 for a Harvard education, they're going to take it. And they'll take cash, check, credit card, wire transfer, however you want to do it. But if you can't pay $75,000 a year, guess what? Harvard's got $40 billion. In other words, if you've got the brains but not the bucks, they've got it. You get some big state schools like the University of Texas, University of Michigan, my alma mater, University of Virginia, Penn State, and others, where they have pretty nice size endowments, nice coffers. You get some of the Ivy League schools like Yale and Princeton, private institutions like Notre Dame and Emory. I'll stop for a second on the upper right-hand corner, Indiana University. And I always stop there. I grew up in Indiana. My mom's a graduate of Indiana University, so it's sort of got a place that's near and dear to my heart. Indiana University has 40,000 students, roughly. Okay? My niece is a freshman at Indiana University right now. And so, but they got 40,000 students to divide that $2.5 billion endowment. Just a notch below them there is a little tiny school. I always say little tiny school in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Iowa, which I now just offended my hostess, Emily, who is in the middle of Iowa. But Grinnell is a school that a lot of people just don't know. It is a great school. It was written about, there's a gentleman by the name of Loren Pope, who years ago wrote a book called Colleges That Change Lives. And it's a list of 40 schools that are a little bit off the beaten path, but really solid, mainly liberal arts schools like Grinnell, really well respected. They used to have a gentleman on their board of directors by the name of Warren Buffett. But bottom line is this. Grinnell has $2.1 billion. I realize that for you and me, there's a big difference between $2.1 billion and $2.5 billion. But here's the difference. This year, Grinnell has 1,734 students. You think you can stretch roughly $2.5 billion more among 40,000 students or 1,700 students? My point is, Grinnell is the type of school that has money and that gives money. And that's really key on this stuff. Is understanding as you go through the process, if you're going to be eligible for need-based or even merit-based aid, you want to find schools that have money and that give money. And we'll talk through some examples of that as we go. So how do you get the money? Well, the first step is to apply for it. Most of you are probably familiar with a form called the FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid. There's also a second form that's used by about 179 undergraduate schools called the CSS Profile. They dive a little bit deeper. So they want to know things like the non-custodial parent, right? If parents are divorced, tell us about the parent who doesn't have custody. They might want to know about home equity. They might want to know about money that you have inside of retirement plans, etc. And then some schools also have their own institutional forms. There's about 40 schools that use a form called the consensus formula. So just understand, as you're going through the process, they're going to have one of three forms. Schools may have their own forms that they utilize. You just want to know that going in. We talked early on about cost of attendance. The second term with which to familiarize yourself is what's called the expected family contribution. Cost of attendance minus expected family contribution is your family's financial need. That gap is the amount of aid for which your family is eligible. Now notice I highlight, underline, make gold the word eligible. And the reason is it's not necessarily the amount that you're going to get. It's the amount for which you're eligible. We work with families every single year where they would be eligible for some significant need-based aid, but their children end up attending schools that don't have or don't give money. And as a result, guess what? They're paying full freight, or they're paying more than they probably should for those universities. So understand the process, understand how it works, understand what it means to you and your family. Before I dive into the formula, it's also important to understand that some things count and some things don't count. So in terms of what counts, the accessible side of this screen, in terms of assets, it's things that you can easily get your hands on. Your bank accounts, your investments. Now, when I say investments there, I mean stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, those type of things that are outside of a retirement plan. Okay, so not an IRA, a 401k, a 403b, a thrift savings plan, etc. 529 plans. By the way, 529 plans are considered an asset of the parent. Custodial accounts. If you own a business, here's the catch, with over 100 employees. If you have an investment property, the equity in that property. The income, again, is pretty straightforward. Wages, rental income, business income, interest, dividends, child support, Social Security, welfare, and the one that always jumps out to people, your current retirement plan deferrals. So if you're putting $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 a year into your retirement plan, the colleges want to know about that. The way that the Department of Education looks at this is they basically say you don't need to save for retirement, you do need to save for college. Don't shoot the messenger. Now, the good news as we transition to the non-assessable side of this sheet is to understand that some things don't count. At most schools, money that you already have inside of your retirement plans doesn't count. Your equity in your primary residence, whether that's a home, a farm, etc., it doesn't count. Cash value that you might have inside of life insurance or annuities doesn't count. Household items, televisions, cars, artwork, collections, doesn't count. Personal debt also, though, doesn't count. So if you had $100,000 in your bank account and you owed $30,000 on the credit cards, they'd count the 100, they'd ignore the 30. By the way, if that's your situation, probably not a bad idea to get that $30,000 of credit card debt paid off. In terms of income, things that don't count, financial aid, food stamps, pension rollovers, and any loans that you may have. Your homework, what I would encourage you to do is to go to our website, and the website address is down there at the bottom. You'll see a spot where you can calculate your expected family contribution. You'll also see there are some tools there. Our advisors even have a more robust tool that if you sit down with one of our advisors, they'll walk through it with you. But the key is to understand how it works. There's the section on the website. Just look for that EFC calculator right on our homepage. You can also go to the Get Help menu that I mentioned before, and you can find right at the top there is our EFC calculator. Those are actually two different calculators, so you can compare and contrast the two with one another. So take a look at that as you go through the process. Here's just an example. So on the left-hand side is the income. So this is mom and dad, what's your combined income if you're married. If you're not married, they just want to know about the custodial parent. And then across the top is the assets. And we're just giving you an example here. So assets, excluding primary residence, excluding retirement accounts. So what do you have in bank accounts, 529 plans, etc. So as an example here, if you earn $150,000 and have $200,000 of savings, your estimated expected family contribution is $42,941. You've got there at the bottom just the direct link to the website to be able to calculate your expected family contribution. So that's your starting point. That's your line in the sand. Call it $43,000 a year that the colleges and universities expect your family to pay for the upcoming school year. Now, keep in mind, you're going to do this every year. So if your income changes, if your assets change, they want to know the new numbers each and every year for which you are interested in qualifying for need-based aid. There's a few strategies out there. Strategy number one, have twins. Now, some of you on this call probably have twins, which is fantastic. Great planning. If you didn't have twins, it may be too late. But just understand, whether it's twins or just multiple kids in school simultaneously, when that second child is in school, right now, they divide by the number of kids in school simultaneously. So there's all sorts of strategies around that. Maybe you consider a gap year for one or the older of the children. Maybe one of your children does community college and then transfers. We've got all kinds of success stories around both of those options, where now instead of having maybe kids overlapping or things like that, maybe you are able to piggyback them so that they're both in school for 4 years, even if they're not what I'll call traditional twins. So lots of things to think about. Community college option, I just think this is really interesting. Students who live at home and attend community college for freshman and sophomore years save approximately 39% as opposed to if they just simply went off to the 4-year college from day one. So it's a lot of savings. It's certainly something to think about. It's not right for every child, but I think it's something that warrants discussion. Depending on your child, depending on your family's circumstances, it may make a lot of sense. And I think too, it used to be looked down upon. I think today, with the cost of college, it's being much more widely accepted. And I would tell you, the thing that's interesting is at the end of 4 or maybe 5 years, when they graduate from that 4-year institution, the diploma looks identical. And if you're coming out of maybe a major state school, they probably don't ask you the question, hey, did you happen to go to 2 years of community college before you came to this school? Nobody ever knows from that point forward. So I think for the right families, it can be a tremendous money saver, maybe even time saver to get some of those classes knocked out. And let's face it, in some cases, to make sure that your child really is what I'll call college material, that they're a good fit for college, and they're not just going to be wasting mom and dad's money if you send them off to college and they look at it as a 2 or 3 or 4 or more year excuse to have a wild party or something like that. So be smart and make sure that you're doing things the right way. However, all of this is changing. The FAFSA is changing in July of 2023, basically for the 2024 school year. And so, and they may even push that back further, but there's some changes. And we've got 12 of them listed here. I'm not going to go in depth with you, but just understand that this thing that we're talking about tonight, the EFC, expected family contribution, is being replaced by something called the Student Aid Index. This is kind of cool. They're moving it from 108 questions to 36, trying to simplify the process. They're changing the income protection allowance so that they no longer divide by the number in college simultaneously. So all those parents of twins or those who are going to have multiple kids in school simultaneously, again, don't shoot the messenger. I don't make the rules. But they're changing that so you no longer benefit by having multiple kids in school, starting with either the 23 or 24 school year. And I say that vaguely because there's a lot of discussion that they're actually going to punt it till 2024. Not definitive yet, but likely. The parent income protection allowance actually increases by 20%, which is good. The dependent student income protection allowance increases by 35%. And there are going to be some revised rules regarding custodial parent. right? So it used to be that there were sort of these 7 rules that you went through to determine who is the custodial parent, right? And it was who does the child spend the majority of time with, which parent provides the majority of support, etc. It's now going to be who claims the child on the tax return in the prior tax year. Okay, and if that's not happening for some reason, it's which parent has the greatest adjusted gross income. So things to think about and just be aware of as this process and formula continue to evolve. A few more little things. Untaxed income will no longer be reported on the FAFSA. I think that's great because kids got penalized if maybe a grandparent was had a 529 plan, it was paying a little bit, or paying the school directly. It was a little bit of a problem for some families. So they're just doing away with that, which I think is great. There's going to be no allowances, though, for state and other taxes. So it used to be that you got to deduct whatever you're paying on your state taxes. Income earned from work can be set to 0 if the student or parent receives or applies for unemployment benefits within the last 90 days. Students will be able to look up whether they'll be eligible for a Pell Grant based upon their income and family size information even before they apply, which I think is critical. Federal aid eligibility for students who were previously not allowed to qualify for need-based aid. And then lastly, colleges must disclose all cost of attendance elements on the website. So you'll see many schools have a net price calculator. Some of them haven't even updated the net price calculator since they were required to have it during the Obama administration. And so they're very much out of date in some cases. So schools will now be required to disclose that. So I think for the most part, all of those are good things. The pushback from families is the multiple kids in school simultaneously. That only applies or matters, though, if you would be eligible for need-based aid. And so many families with whom we work, they draw the line in the sand. They say, here's my EFC, here's the cost of attendance, and guess what? I make too much money. Not eligible for need-based aid. What do I do? Another thing that I'd encourage you to take a look at are what are called tuition reciprocity programs. This is if your child is looking at an out-of-state school. And so you can see there's 4 major ones in the U.S. I'll start with the Academic Common Market, which is in my neck of the woods here in the Washington, D.C. area. Out west, the Western Undergraduate Exchange. Up north, the New England Regional Student Program. And in the Midwest, the Midwest Student Exchange. All these programs have slightly different rules, but the idea is if your child is looking at out-of-state schools, you may want to look into these programs where you could potentially qualify for in-state tuition at those out-of-state schools. Those states that are in gray, I apologize, they don't participate in any of these programs. So things to think about. Talk to your legislators. Let's get them involved. Then the natural question becomes, okay, Brock, that's great, but I'm not going to qualify for need-based aid. I make too much money, or I've done a good job of saving money, and as a result, I'm going to be ineligible for need-based aid. Understand that college funding planning is not just about qualifying for need-based aid. There are lots and lots of strategies for you to consider that may make sense for some of these strategies. So let's take a look at using our own money. Number 1, maximize the efficiency of your money. Okay, things to think about. Are you carrying a lot of non-deductible debt? Things like credit cards, student loans, etc. Could you increase your cash flow? Well, a lot of times it's right under people's noses and you don't realize it. Number 3, what role do taxes play on your investments? Any of you here pay too much in taxes? What if you could legally, morally, and ethically reduce your tax liability and then redeploy some of that money towards college? If you're a business owner, maybe it makes sense to hire your kids in the business and shift the income tax liability from mom and dad's high income tax bracket to the children's much lower income tax bracket. Now, if you're eligible for need-based aid, that's a really bad strategy because you're going to boot yourself out of need-based aid eligibility. But if you can't qualify for need-based aid, then all of a sudden that might be a really good strategy because you've shifted the tax liability. What if you could delay paying for college for another 4 years? I call that the found opportunity cost as opposed to a lost opportunity cost. My question for you is where we started at the beginning of today's presentation. Where do most families have most of their money? Two places. Let's look at both. Does this look like or sound like a good strategy to you? Now, oftentimes when I'm in front of an auditorium and we might have 300 or 400 or 500 parents in an auditorium, I'll say, everybody stand up for a second. Now, I can't see into your living room or your office or wherever you happen to be watching this today, but think about it. I'm going to read you some bullet points, and you can stand up, you can do it, but what I normally ask people to do is I just want you to sit down when you no longer like the strategy. So this strategy, all deposits, you're making monthly contributions, all deposits are not safe from loss of principal. Number two, the customer can pay more than the minimum monthly contribution, but not less. If the customer attempts to pay less, the financial institution keeps all previous contributions. Number three, if the customer misses a monthly contribution, it negatively impacts their credit score. Number four, each contribution made to the account is illiquid and results in less safety and increased tax liability. And number five, the money in the account earns a whopping 0% rate of return. Now you might look at that and say, Brock, why in the world would I ever put money into that particular investment? But I tell you what, we see people doing it day in and day out. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about your mortgage. Or more specifically, I'm talking about paying extra principal towards a mortgage. Right? We see families all the time where they say, Brock, I want to own the home free and clear by the time I retire. I want to own it free and clear within 5 years, whatever it may be, which is great, very worthwhile objective. But the challenge is this, especially with where interest rates are right now. If Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whatever your bank of choice may be is willing to give you a very large mortgage at a really low interest rate, I think that's tremendously attractive because you don't actually earn anything by paying extra principal. You reduce the mortgage balance, but your home will appreciate or sometimes depreciate regardless of the equity that you have tied to your house. So my idea is, why not grow an account and also build the value of your home simultaneously? Now you've got multiple assets growing simultaneously, as opposed to taking another asset, the cash, and tying it into the home equity by owning your home free and clear. Please don't get me wrong, it feels really good to own a home free and clear, but it's not necessarily economically efficient. And if you're a parent who says, I want to save and pay for my children's college education and still retire one day, owning your home free and clear could actually be detrimental to your ability to pay for your child's education. So again, more to that strategy, but certainly something to think about. Last thing is what I call the qualified plan problem. And it goes like this. Does anybody here have a pension? Well, it used to be that everybody did, right? You used to go and you used to work for a company for 40 years. And when you retired, you got a gold pocket watch and you got a pension. And that pension was going to pay you for as long as you or your spouse worked. Or sorry, as long as you or your spouse lived. Which back in the day might have been, 8 or 10 years. In 1974, it all changed. Because in 1974, Congress passed a law called ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. You know it as your 401k, your 403b, or your thrift savings plan, etc. And it said instead of having a defined benefit plan, you'll have a defined contribution plan. That you have the privilege, the right, the honor to defer money into a retirement plan. Your employer may make matching contributions, but they're not required to. The day you stop working for that firm, they wash their hands of all responsibility, right? Again, you know that as your 401k, and that's how it worked. And it shifted that onus of responsibility from the shoulders of the employer to the shoulders of the employee. And so let's look at a situation. Let's say, as an example, that you've got that you're 47 years old, that you're going to work until you're 67. We looked into our crystal ball and we see that you're going to live until you're 90. You've got $100,000 in what I call old money, money that's already in the retirement plan. You're deferring $10,000 per year. You've got $3,000 in matching contributions from your employer. And we also look into that crystal ball to see that you're going to earn 8% on your money. So let's do some quick math. $100,000 growing at 8% from age 47 to age 67 grows to $466,000. The $10,000, same math, grows to $494,000. The $3,000 that your employer puts in there each and every year grows to $148,000 a year. Add it all up. You're at the top of the mountain, ready to take your first step down the mountain. You've got $1.1 million set aside. But now all the rules change. Now you're taking distributions. Well, the good news is that we know exactly what your rate of return is, and we know precisely when you're going to die. So we can do a calculation here to say, you know what, you can pull out $97,493 per year. If you live longer than age 90, you're in trouble. You're out of money. Your federal taxes, my question is always, what do you have to do? What have you not done on this money? Well, I gave away the answer. You got to pay taxes, right? You've got federal taxes at 22%. You've got state taxes that average about 6%. So you walk away, that $97,000 of income, your net income is actually $70,195 after taxes. Now I look at that and I say, wow, we just paid $27,000 in federal and state income taxes. Now, what's the main reason that people put money into a corporate retirement plan like a 401k to begin with? And oftentimes, one of the primary answers is to save money on taxes. Let's do some math. Let's say that today you're in that same 22% federal tax bracket. You're deferring $10,000. Okay? How much do you save in taxes? I'll help you with the math. It's $2,200. 22% of $10,000. You save $2,200. Okay? And you're going to do that for 20 years from age 47 to 67. So every year you save $2,200. That's $44,000 that you save over 20 years in federal taxes. How long does it take you to pay back every single dime that you saved over that 20-year period? Answer is a little over 2 years. In a little over 2 years, you pay back every single dime that you saved in federal taxes. Now, let me make that a little bit worse, because the reality is, even if this was your exact same situation, today you might not be in the 22% tax bracket. Because every single one of you, I believe, has at least one beautiful young tax deduction who lives under your roof. You might have mortgage interest that you're deducting. You might be contributing to a retirement plan, all of which bring you from a high tax bracket to a lower tax bracket. Now let's fast forward. You're 67, you're 73, you're 82 years old. Where are the kids? I heard somebody say they're living in my basement. Which, if that's the case, I'm sorry. You have all the responsibility, the financial liability, but you cannot deduct them any longer. What about number two? The mortgage deductions. For most of you, you've either paid the home off or you've paid it way down, so you don't have much in the way of deductions any longer. Number three is the contributions to the retirement plan. You retired, you have no contributions. If you're a business owner and you have business deductions, hopefully you sold the business. My point is this: all the things for which you get tax deductions in your working or your accumulation years are gone. And now you're retiring, you're distributing money, and you may actually be in a higher effective tax bracket. I hear parents all the time and say, well, I'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement because I read it somewhere online. The reality is you might not be in a lower tax bracket. And just this week, new proposals have come out from the administration saying that they're going to raise federal taxes from a current high of 37% to 39.8%. There's discussions of doing away with capital gains tax treatment, all kinds of things. My point is this, my opinion too, add in the fact that we've got right now about a $28 trillion federal debt. We've got major challenges with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. My opinion is that taxes are likely going up in the future. Are you deferring money inside of a 401k or other similar instrument to a point when you may actually be in a higher tax bracket than you are today? Again, there's a lot worse things that you could do with your money. But if it's a goal, to save and pay for your children's college education and still retire one day, it's really important that you do the math to say, am I on track for retirement? Could I maybe redeploy some of those dollars and maybe actually do so more efficiently by putting it towards something where maybe I could pull the money out tax-free? Maybe I could use it for retirement or college, things like that. Here's some examples. Make Uncle Sam your partner. Leverage that tax code, right? The bad news is there aren't too many instruments that allow for tax-free distributions, but there are some. One of them is a Section 529 plan. Section 529, quite frankly, is one of the greatest tax instruments out there because there aren't too many instruments that give you a tax deduction in some states, tax deferred growth, and tax-free withdrawals as long as it's used for education. Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks allow for tax-free distributions on the back end. Now you might say, well, I'm not eligible for a Roth. Here's a news flash. If that was you, every single American is eligible for a Roth, whether you do it directly or you do it through what's called the back door, where you can actually do a conversion from a traditional or a non-deductible IRA to a Roth IRA. I won't go into it in depth today, but just understand everybody can contribute to a Roth regardless of income. There may just be some hoops that you need to jump through. Municipal bonds allow for tax-free growth and withdrawals. And then lastly, cash value life insurance. I didn't talk about it too much on today's presentation, but cash value life insurance or permanent life insurance, not term insurance, can be a wonderful instrument because it allows people to not only have the important life insurance protection that they need, but also it's not considered an assessable asset for purposes of college. You get tax-free growth and potentially tax-free withdrawals and a tax-free death benefit. So lots of advantages there as well. Not right for everybody, but there are some strategies involving cash value life insurance that make a lot of sense, largely because of the guarantees in some cases and some of the tax advantages. So again, like anything, pros and cons to every single financial instrument. There are pros and cons to all 4 or 5 or 6 of those instruments delineated here. But it's important to understand them and understand how they work, why they work that way, and why they might be attractive for your situation. Now, I started this class by telling you that most people have most of their money in 2 places, the equity in their homes and in their retirement plans. And I've just concluded this class by telling you that those are terrible, awful places to have your money. Please don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that because that's where so many people have their money, and because many of you might not qualify for need-based aid, it's really, really important that you understand all the ins and outs. Okay, so that's the bad news. The good news is that you can do it. And over the last 20 years, the College Funding Coach has worked with thousands of families, probably a lot like yours, to help navigate this maze and to help you figure out the strategies that may make sense for your situation. Now, a couple of things. I always tell people we plan comprehensively. Because college is so expensive, you can't look at college in a vacuum. You have to look at everything. And so we do comprehensive financial planning. Obviously, we're going to focus on college funding strategies as one of the cornerstones of your financial plan, but it's also how does it relate to everything else? Ultimately, the result is that it may allow your child or your children to attend more prestigious, less crowded, maybe private schools, oftentimes for the same net out-of-pocket cost as in-state public schools. The key is to develop a process, create strategies around it, become an informed buyer, and last but absolutely not least, start early. The earlier you start on this stuff, the better. And so that's why it's really, you've got time on your side. That's why it's really important. Again, if you've got a 2nd grader or a 3rd grader or even a 2-year-old, start now. You've got way more options and strategies and opportunities, and you've got time on your side. If you're the parent of the 10th grader, it's okay. It's not too late, but it's a different set of strategies. We'd love your feedback. Normally, when we do these at a high school or a middle school or a live webinar, we ask people to complete a survey that we send them. You can get to that survey either, again, use your phone. You can put it on that QR code. Just open up the camera app, put it there. You can go to our website. We've got a specialized website for this, which is cfcsurvey.org. Or you can call Bernadette Boyle from our team. Her phone number is here, 571-296-4075. You can call her she can get you the information. The key on this is the conversation is going to continue. It's going to continue in one of two ways, right? And maybe both. Number one, when you complete that survey, you're going to get lots of information. You're going to get access to our mini vault. In our mini vault, you've got a copy of the slides. You've got a recording of this webinar. You've got access to a ton of our calculators, white papers, more information than you could ever want or use or need. But it's really where we store things. It's behind a firewall because we don't want everybody to just have access to everything. We want to share it with the people who have taken the time to sit through this webinar and understand some of the strategic nature of some of this. You're going to get access to this really cool, what we call our 6-step family action plan for college. It's going to walk you through everything we talked about today. Again, you can click on the QR code there if you want to go ahead and get that information. Also on the mini vault, you can see it there, you've got lots of calculators. You've got our college saving calculator, our EFC calculators, etc. You're also going to be subscribed to our newsletter. Every 2 weeks, we put out a newsletter that gives you really topical information, gives you a list. We do webinars like this. We do specialty webinars on very specific deep dive conversations, whether that's on student loans or scholarships or you name it. Lots of information. We try to really be a value-added provider for you and somebody that you can trust and find good information about this process. So you want to do that. If you do nothing more, when you leave this, make sure you subscribe to that mini vault and you get access to all those cool tools. I always say it's sort of like Christmas morning at the Jolly House, right? Kids come downstairs. There's all kinds of good stuff there, right? It's Christmas morning. You're getting out of bed. Here's what you're going to get. Go subscribe. I'm telling you, it's free stuff. You can unsubscribe at any time. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but go check it out. I think you'll find that it's really, really valuable information. The other thing, too, is that if you'd like to sit down with a member of our team, we offer totally free consultations. I know you probably can't read everything that's on the screen now, but we've got this 6-step process that we work through with families to really look at your situation, understand where you are today. Are you going to qualify for need-based aid or not? How do you develop a strategy around that? Where are you today in terms of college and retirement and all the other pieces of the financial planning puzzle? That's what we look at right here. So if you'd like that, again, it's a totally free consultation, and we'll look at it, understand it, give you a sense of what might be good next steps. You can also reach out to us directly. That's my direct office line. You can call us. You can go visit our website. We've got loads of information on the website. Also, I'd encourage you to join our Facebook. We've got 2 pages on Facebook. That there is just the Facebook page. But also on Facebook, search for Little Known Secrets of Paying for College. We've got a Facebook group where we've got a few thousand subscribers where they're sharing information and resources all the time. Right? So we understand that, if this is a one-way conversation, it doesn't work real well. But if we can get thousands of parents around the country who are sharing ideas, best practices, tools, tips, tricks, techniques, that's a really good thing. And so Little Known Secrets of Paying for College is that Facebook group. We've got a YouTube channel. We're on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. Let us know what we can do to help, right? So like I said, we want the conversation to continue. We want to be a resource for you. Lastly, on our website, you've also got lots and lots of resources. I talk a lot about this concept I call unique ability. Our unique ability is helping families understand the financial planning piece of college. But there's lots of other things, whether that is qualifying for scholarships, student loans, career development, student loan refinancing, writing essays, any number of things, right? There's a lot. And we've vetted and partnered with lots and lots of organizations. And there's a sampling of them here, but you can also find those on our website under the Get Help and then Resources tab. So visit our website, lots of information out there. And that's it. Emily told me we had an hour. I think looking at my clock, we're at 59 minutes. So I think I nailed it. But if anybody does have questions, unlike a traditional webinar, we don't have the ability to have a chat box and ask questions. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, ask our team, go onto the website, lots of resources to ask questions. We want to be a resource for you. Again, thank you very much, Emily and all the team at NAIFA. Thank you for your tireless efforts and all you do on behalf of NAIFA to protect America's future and all the good things that NAIFA does for the promises that I and my peer advisors make to our clients every single day. So thank you very much. Good luck. Let us know how we can help.
Brock, thank you so much. Great information. Even though I don't have a child, I don't have a child, period. It was still really interesting information from somebody who isn't even, looking at this as part of their life right now. But I do appreciate the shout out to Grinnell.
Well, I'm
But
thinking, Emily, maybe there are some parents on the call that might be looking for somebody to adopt their child and pay for their education. So if you're willing to do that, I mean, you could probably line up a few children right now and just be at least a foster parent or something to help pay for
yeah,
their
yeah,
child's education.
I'll put it, I'll put it on my list of
Okay,
things
fair enough.
I hope to accomplish. But no, this is fantastic information. Again, Brock, thank you so much. NEFA is really striving towards this financial security for all, and obviously, college funding is a huge portion of that. And I love your tagline of, how do I send my kids to college and still retire? So some great tips that people can put into effect immediately, like you said, whether your kid is 2 or in 10th grade. So thank you again, and appreciate all you do.
Thanks, Emily. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.